21 black celebrities whose partners died of incurable diseases. Fame is supposed to protect you. Money is supposed to buy time. Power is supposed to defeat pain. But what happens when none of it works? Behind the spotlight, behind the trophies and applause, many black legends were forced to watch the people they loved slowly disappear, consumed by incurable diseases they could not fight, fix, or escape. These are not tabloid rumors or exaggerated myths. These are real lives, real losses, and real moments of helplessness that success could not prevent. Before you judge their choices or their silence, listen to their stories. Watch until the end and tell us what you think in the comments. This is Black Excellence Legends. Sidney Poitier. Sidney Poitier is remembered as a symbol of dignity, strength, and quiet revolution in American cinema. As the first black actor to win the Academy Award for Best Actor, he did more than break barriers. He redefined how black men were seen on screen. Films such as Lilies of the Field, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and In the Heat of the Night placed him at the center of cultural change during one of the most divided eras in U.S. history. To the public, Poitier appeared unshakable, a man whose presence alone commanded respect. Yet behind that image of control and triumph was a private life shaped by fear, vulnerability, and emotional endurance. During the late 1980s, Poitier faced one of the most difficult chapters of his life when his wife, actress Joanna Shimkus, was diagnosed with serious thyroid cancer. While Poitier was accustomed to navigating pressure in public, nothing prepared him for the helplessness of watching illness slowly consume the person he loved. Treatments were long, physically exhausting, and emotionally draining, transforming their home into a space defined by medical routines rather than celebration. At the peak of his professional power, Poitier made a decision few outsiders understood. He stepped away from major film opportunities. Industry sources later confirmed that he declined high-paying roles during this period to focus entirely on his family. The cost was not only emotional, but financial, as extended medical care in the United States during that era often reached hundreds of thousands of dollars. Fame, it turned out, could not shield him from the realities of illness. What makes Sidney Poitier's story deeply moving is not tragedy and death, but resilience in life. His wife survived after years of treatment, yet Poitier emerged forever changed, more reserved, more reflective, and less interested in the spotlight he once dominated. He later admitted that success meant little when measured against the fragility of human life. Sidney Poitier's legacy is not only about cinematic greatness, it is about a man who learned that even legends kneel when love is threatened, and that true strength is revealed not on Curtis Mayfield. Curtis Mayfield was not only a musical innovator, but also a moral voice for a generation. As the creative force behind songs like People Get Ready and Move On Up, Mayfield used melody as a vehicle for hope, resilience, and social awareness. His music carried a calm authority, never shouting, never begging, yet it moved millions and became part of the soundtrack of the civil rights era. To audiences, Curtis Mayfield represented progress, strength, and clarity. That image shattered in 1990. During an outdoor performance in Brooklyn, a lighting rig collapsed, striking Mayfield and causing catastrophic spinal injuries. He was left paralyzed from the neck down. Overnight, a man who had spent decades standing tall on stage was confined to a bed, dependent on constant medical care. The tragedy deepened only months later when his wife, Althea Mayfield, was diagnosed with late-stage ovarian cancer. The disease progressed aggressively, bringing exhaustion, pain, and repeated hospitalizations. What followed was a period of quiet suffering that rarely made headlines. While Curtis faced life as a quadriplegic, Althea endured chemotherapy and surgeries, often while helping manage her husband's care. Medical costs mounted quickly, reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars over several years. Despite royalties from a legendary catalog, the financial strain was real, reflecting a broader reality. Long-term illness can drain even those once considered untouchable. Althea Mayfield passed away in 1998. Curtis survived her by just 1 year, dying in 1999. Yet even in his final years, Mayfield continued to record music, singing softly into a microphone while lying flat, his voice fragile but determined. His later album, New World Order, stands as proof that creativity can survive even when the body does not. Curtis Mayfield's story is tragic, not because of mystery, but because of endurance. He lived through a convergence of physical disability and profound personal loss, yet refused to surrender his voice. His legacy reminds us that strength is not always visible. It often exists in persistence, quiet courage, and the will to keep creating even as life takes everything else away. James Brown. James Brown was known to the world as the godfather of soul, a performer whose energy, discipline, and precision redefined live music. On stage, he was unstoppable, controlling crowds with a single shout, a sharp turn, or a perfectly timed drop to his knees. His influence shaped funk, hip-hop, and modern performance itself. Yet behind the relentless rhythm was a personal life marked by volatility and emotional chaos. One of the most painful chapters of James Brown's life involved his wife, Adrienne Rodriguez Brown. Their marriage was turbulent, defined by frequent conflicts, legal disputes, and substance abuse. Adrienne struggled with long-term drug addiction and declining health, issues that worsened throughout the early 1990s. Over time, she developed severe cardiac complications linked to substance dependency and chronic stress. In December 1995, Adrienne collapsed and was hospitalized with acute heart failure. Doctors managed to revive her multiple times, but her condition remained critical. She passed away in January 1996 at the age of 49. Medical records cited heart failure related to long-term drug use as the cause of death. There is no verified evidence of foul play, though the circumstances highlighted the destructive intersection of addiction, emotional distress, and untreated trauma. James Brown's response was strikingly muted. He attended the funeral briefly and returned to performing soon after. To some, this appeared cold. To others, it reflected a man emotionally conditioned to suppress vulnerability. Brown himself rarely spoke publicly about Adrienne's death, choosing instead to bury grief beneath work and routine. The tragedy of James Brown's story lies not in unanswered questions, but in emotional isolation. Despite fame, wealth, and cultural power, he was unable or unwilling to confront the personal damage unfolding around him. Adrienne Brown's death became another unspoken cost of a life lived at extremes. James Brown's legacy remains monumental, but his personal history serves as a sobering reminder. Artistic genius does not guarantee emotional health. When pain goes unaddressed, it does not disappear. It simply finds quieter, more devastating ways to end lives. Barry White. Barry White was universally known as the voice of love. Deep, velvet-toned, and unmistakably intimate. His music defined romance for an entire generation, turning songs like "You're the First, the Last, My Everything" into timeless anthems. On stage and on record, Barry projected confidence and emotional control. Yet behind the smooth delivery was a personal life far more fragile than his public image suggested. Barry White's long relationship with Glodian James, a fellow singer and member of the group Love Unlimited, was marked by both creative partnership and emotional distance. As Barry's career accelerated, long studio hours and constant touring created strain that slowly widened the gap between them. In the late 1990s, Glodian was diagnosed with a serious ovarian tumor that required major surgery and prolonged treatment. Medical records and interviews confirm that the illness was severe and life-altering, forcing her into a long period of physical weakness and isolation. During this time, Barry continued to perform and tour, a decision that later drew criticism but also reflected the era's harsh reality. Performers often felt compelled to keep working, regardless of personal crisis. Glodine survived the surgery, but never fully recovered her former strength. The relationship never returned to its earlier closeness, and the emotional bond that once sustained them gradually dissolved. What makes Barry White's story tragic is not scandal, but absence. Absence during moments when presence mattered most. Fame gave him a voice heard around the world, yet it failed to teach him how to remain emotionally available when illness stripped his partner of independence and vitality. Barry White later faced serious health issues of his own, including kidney failure, and died in 2003. Looking back, his life reveals a painful irony. A man celebrated for expressing love through music struggled to navigate it when confronted with illness and emotional vulnerability. His story reminds us that romantic songs do not always translate into emotional endurance when real suffering enters the room. Smokey Robinson. Smokey Robinson's songwriting defined tenderness. As the lyrical heart of Motown, he gave the world melodies built on gentleness, devotion, and emotional nuance. Songs like Tracks of My Tears and Ooh, Baby, Baby captured heartbreak with poetic restraint, making Smokey one of the most respected writers in popular music history. His public persona was calm, thoughtful, and deeply romantic. That image contrasted sharply with the private struggles within his marriage to Claudette Rogers Robinson, his longtime partner and fellow member of the Miracles. In the early 1970s, Claudette was diagnosed with systemic lupus erythematosus, a chronic autoimmune disease that attacks the body's own organs. The illness caused severe joint pain, fatigue, internal complications, and repeated hospitalizations. Over time, it also led to multiple miscarriages, adding emotional devastation to physical suffering. As Claudette's health declined, Smokey's career demands intensified. Touring schedules, recording sessions, and executive responsibilities kept him away for long periods. While there is no evidence of neglect or malice, the separation created emotional distance that neither fame nor affection could repair. Claudette increasingly lived in isolation, managing pain and loss while Smokey remained consumed by professional obligations. Eventually, the marriage ended, not in scandal, but in exhaustion. Lupus did not simply attack Claudette's body, it eroded the shared future they had imagined. Smokey later acknowledged that the illness changed everything, leaving scars that never fully healed. The tragedy of Smokey Robinson's story lies in quiet erosion rather than dramatic collapse. His songs taught the world how to express love, yet illness revealed how fragile love becomes when daily suffering replaces shared joy. Claudette survived the disease for many years, but the relationship did not. Their story stands as a reminder that chronic illness can dismantle even the gentlest bonds, not through conflict, but through relentless, unending strain. Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor was one of the most fearless comedians in history, transforming pain into honesty with unmatched courage. His comedy stripped away illusion, confronting addiction, race, trauma, and vulnerability without apology. To audiences, Pryor seemed indestructible, a man who laughed at disaster and survived what others could not. In his personal life, however, Pryor faced suffering that humor could not soften. His wife, Jennifer Lee Pryor, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in the early 1990s. The disease progressed aggressively, requiring chemotherapy that left her physically weakened and emotionally drained. At the same time, Richard Pryor himself was battling multiple sclerosis, a degenerative neurological disease that steadily robbed him of mobility, speech clarity, and independence. The timing was devastating. As Jennifer's strength faded, Richard's condition worsened, leaving two people increasingly unable to care for one another. Friends described their home as a place of shared despair, where illness dominated every conversation and decision. Hospital visits, treatment schedules, and physical limitations replaced intimacy and normalcy. In 1991, Jennifer collapsed at home and was rushed to the hospital. Although she survived the immediate crisis, the emotional toll was irreversible. The marriage fractured under the weight of simultaneous illness, leading to separation and reconciliation attempts that reflected desperation rather than resolution. What makes Richard Pryor's story especially tragic is the role reversal it forced upon him. A man who once controlled the room with laughter was left powerless, unable to protect the person he loved or even fully care for himself. There is no mystery or conspiracy in this story, only the brutal reality of disease arriving at the worst possible moment. Richard Pryor lived until 2005, but the years following Jennifer's illness marked a slow retreat from public life. His story reveals a harsh truth. Humor can expose pain, but it cannot cure it. Sometimes, even the strongest voices fall silent when illness speaks louder than laughter. Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman is widely regarded as the embodiment of calm authority, an actor whose voice alone conveys wisdom, patience, and moral gravity. Across decades of film, Freeman became a symbol of resilience and quiet strength, portraying figures of guidance rather than spectacle. Yet behind this composed public image, his private life was shaped by a long, emotionally draining battle with illness that slowly dismantled a marriage built on shared creativity and mutual respect. Freeman was married to Myrna Colley Lee, a respected stage designer whose work thrived away from the spotlight. In the early 2000s, Myrna was diagnosed with systemic lupus erythematosus, a chronic autoimmune disease capable of attacking the lungs, heart, joints, and kidneys. The illness progressed unpredictably, marked by periods of extreme fatigue, joint pain, and respiratory complications that required repeated hospital care. Lupus is incurable, and long-term management often becomes a daily struggle rather than a path to recovery. As Myrna's condition worsened, Freeman was frequently away filming, often overseas. While there is no evidence of neglect or wrongdoing, the reality of chronic illness placed immense strain on the relationship. Medical routines replaced normalcy, and emotional distance grew, not from lack of care, but from exhaustion. Friends later described a marriage worn down, not by conflict, but by the relentless presence of disease that reshaped every plan and expectation. The couple eventually divorced in 2010, ending a relationship that had lasted over 2 decades. There was no public scandal, no dramatic confrontation, only a quiet separation reflecting how illness can erode even the strongest bonds. Myrna survived for years with lupus, but the marriage did not. Morgan Freeman's story is tragic in its subtlety. It reveals how illness does not always arrive with sudden loss, but with slow, persistent erosion. Fame offered Freeman no shield against watching someone he loved lose strength piece by piece. His experience reminds us that even lives built on stability can be undone by diseases that demand patience, sacrifice, and emotional endurance far beyond what success can provide. Al Green. Al Green's voice defined intimacy. With a tone as smooth as whispered confession, he became one of soul music's most influential figures, turning vulnerability into power. Songs like "Let's Stay Together" made him synonymous with devotion and emotional closeness. Yet his personal life told a far more fractured story, one shaped by mental illness, fear, and irreversible emotional damage. Green's relationship with Shirley Kiles was marked by volatility, instability, and deep psychological strain. Kiles struggled with severe mental health disorders, including symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress and chronic anxiety. Mental illness, especially untreated, can be as devastating as any physical disease, progressively eroding emotional stability and personal safety. Court records and testimony later revealed a relationship dominated by fear, emotional breakdowns, and repeated legal disputes. Throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, Kyle's condition worsened. She experienced insomnia, panic episodes, and extreme emotional distress that required medication and repeated intervention. At the same time, Green's own life was unraveling, culminating in a traumatic incident that pushed him away from secular music and toward religion. While Green sought spiritual refuge, Kyles remained trapped in a cycle of illness and instability. Their marriage ended not because of fading affection, but because the emotional environment had become unsustainable. Mental illness does not announce an endpoint. It accumulates damage quietly, often leaving both partners exhausted and broken. Kyles survived, but her life was permanently altered by years of psychological trauma. Al Green's story illustrates a rarely discussed truth. Mental illness can be incurable in its consequences, even when the person survives. His music celebrated unity, yet his private life showed how fragile unity becomes when fear replaces safety. The tragedy lies not in death, but in a relationship consumed by illness, long before it could be saved. Isaac Hayes. Isaac Hayes was a giant in soul and funk, composer, producer, and cultural force whose work redefined Black masculinity and cinematic sound. Best known for Theme from Shaft, Hayes stood at the height of success when his personal life was overtaken by a battle that stripped away wealth, stability, and certainty. Hayes's wife, Ayanna Hayes, was diagnosed in the late 1990s with stage 3 breast cancer, a life-threatening illness requiring aggressive and prolonged treatment. The cancer had already spread beyond its original site, demanding chemotherapy, radiation, and constant medical supervision. Treatment costs escalated rapidly, consuming savings and royalties that many assumed would last a lifetime. Hayes responded by stepping back from public life, focusing entirely on caregiving. He sold assets, mortgaged property, and accepted financial losses without hesitation. Friends later confirmed that he considered money irrelevant when weighed against time. Time to extend her life even briefly. Cancer does not negotiate. It advances regardless of devotion, and over time, Ayanna's strength faded. She eventually passed away, leaving Hayes emotionally and financially devastated. The years spent fighting cancer coincided with his withdrawal from mainstream success, contributing to later financial difficulties and legal battles. Yet Hayes never expressed regret. He viewed sacrifice as the only meaningful response to illness. Isaac Hayes' tragedy is rooted in devotion rather than mystery. His story exposes the hidden cost of incurable disease, not only measured in lives, but in livelihoods, identities, and futures surrendered willingly for love. In choosing care over comfort, Hayes demonstrated that true greatness is not found in fame, but in what one is willing to give up when illness leaves no other choice. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye was a master of emotional truth, an artist who turned vulnerability into art long before such honesty was welcomed by the mainstream. His music explored love, pain, spirituality, and inner conflict with unmatched intimacy. Yet behind the poetic genius was a personal life shaped by instability, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion, especially within his marriage to Anna Gordy Gaye, a woman deeply affected by psychological illness. By the mid-1970s, Anna Gordy Gaye was suffering from severe anxiety, depression, and paranoia. Friends and court records from their divorce proceedings later revealed that she lived in constant fear, often isolating herself and struggling with panic attacks that disrupted daily life. Mental illness, unlike visible disease, does not come with clear stages or recovery timelines. It quietly consumes emotional energy, turning love into survival. As Marvin's career fluctuated, the marriage became a pressure chamber. Anna's condition worsened under stress, while Marvin battled his own demons: substance abuse, financial instability, and unresolved childhood trauma. Their home became a place of emotional volatility rather than refuge. The divorce in 1977 was not a release, but a collapse after years of accumulated strain. What makes Marvin Gaye's story tragic is not a single moment, but the slow erosion of intimacy caused by untreated mental illness on both sides. Anna did not die from her condition, but the relationship did. The fear, accusations, and emotional damage left scars that Marvin carried into the final years of his life. Marvin Gaye's later death shocked the world, but the quiet suffering that preceded it is often overlooked. His life demonstrates that emotional illness can be as destructive as any incurable disease, destroying stability, trust, and peace long before it ends a life. His music remains a testament to honesty, but his personal story reminds us how costly that honesty can be when healing never truly arrives. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was known for dominance, discipline, and composure, one of the greatest athletes in sports history. On the basketball court, his presence was commanding, his achievements historic. Yet away from the roar of arenas, Kareem faced a loss that no physical strength could prevent: the slow decline of his wife, Habiba Abdul-Jabbar, who battled thyroid cancer. Habiba was a deeply private person, choosing a life away from fame. When she was diagnosed with thyroid cancer in the mid-1970s, the disease progressed aggressively. Treatments were physically exhausting, often leaving her weak, breathless, and unable to maintain normal routines. Thyroid cancer, while sometimes treatable, can become devastating when it spreads or resists intervention. During this period, Kareem attempted to balance professional commitments with caregiving. He missed games, reduced public appearances, and spent long hours in hospitals, an unfamiliar role for a man accustomed to control. Yet illness reshapes power dynamics mercilessly. Habiba grew increasingly determined not to be defined by her condition, while Kareem struggled with the emotional helplessness of watching someone he loved fade. The illness placed immense strain on their marriage. As Habiba's health deteriorated, emotional distance grew, not from lack of love, but from exhaustion and grief that neither could articulate. Eventually, the relationship ended, leaving Kareem alone with unanswered questions about whether more time, more presence, or different choices could have changed the outcome. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's story is tragic in its restraint. There was no public spectacle, no dramatic collapse, only the quiet realization that greatness offers no immunity against disease. His experience reveals a universal truth. When illness enters a relationship, strength is redefined. Sometimes survival means accepting loss without understanding it. Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. was a symbol of charisma, resilience, and versatility, an entertainer who conquered music, film, and stage despite relentless racial barriers. To the public, his life sparkled with glamour. Privately, however, his final years were shadowed by the devastating illness of his wife, Altavice Davis, whose suffering continued even after Sammy's death. Altavice Davis was diagnosed in the early 2000s with nasopharyngeal cancer, a rare and aggressive disease affecting the throat and upper respiratory system. The illness rapidly impaired her ability to speak, swallow, and breathe comfortably. Treatments were harsh, leaving her physically weakened and emotionally isolated. Cancer stripped away not only her health, but her identity as a performer. As if the diagnosis were not enough, Altavice later tested positive for HIV, a revelation that subjected her to public speculation and stigma. There is no verified evidence regarding how she contracted the virus, and responsible reporting avoids conjecture. What is known is that the dual diagnosis left her facing both physical decline and social judgment. Sammy Davis Jr. had already passed away by the time her condition worsened significantly, leaving Altavice to endure the final stages largely alone. Financial strain, medical costs, and isolation compounded her suffering. She died in 2009, her final years marked by illness rather than applause. The tragedy of Sammy Davis Jr.'s story is deeply ironic. A man who spent his life bringing joy could not protect the person he loved from enduring illness without dignity or support. Their story highlights how disease can outlast fame and how partners of legends often suffer in silence once the spotlight moves on. Altovise Davis's struggle reminds us that legacy is not only about achievements, but about how quietly pain is endured when the world stops watching. Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson has long been celebrated as the embodiment of joy, brilliance, and resilience in sports. On the basketball court, his smile symbolized confidence and hope, a reminder that greatness could be graceful. Yet behind that public optimism was a private life shaped by fear, uncertainty, and prolonged encounters with life-threatening illness, both his own and that of his wife, Cookie Johnson. In 1991, Magic stunned the world by announcing he was HIV positive, a diagnosis widely misunderstood at the time and surrounded by stigma. While Magic's story became one of survival and medical progress, the emotional burden extended deeply into his marriage. Cookie Johnson, newly married and pregnant, suddenly faced a future clouded by fear of loss, contagion, and social judgment. For years, the couple lived under the psychological weight of a disease many still associated with inevitability. More than a decade later, tragedy returned in a different form. In 2005, Cookie Johnson was diagnosed with breast cancer. The news reopened old wounds, forcing the family to confront yet another incurable threat, this time to the woman who had stood beside Magic during his most public crisis. Treatment involved surgery and ongoing medical monitoring, reshaping daily life around hospital visits and recovery. What makes Magic Johnson's story especially powerful is endurance rather than loss. Cookie survived her cancer diagnosis, but the experience permanently altered the emotional landscape of their marriage. Years of living under medical uncertainty took a toll that fame, wealth, and public admiration could not erase. Magic Johnson's journey reveals a quiet truth. Surviving disease does not mean escaping its consequences. Even when partners live, illness leaves scars, emotional, psychological, and relational. His story stands as a testament to perseverance, not invincibility, reminding us that strength is often measured not by victories, but by how long love endures under relentless fear. Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron was revered as one of baseball's greatest legends, a man whose quiet dignity matched his historic achievements. Breaking Babe Ruth's home run record placed Aaron at the center of American history. Yet the cheers faded each night when he returned home to a life marked by illness and irreversible loss. Behind the image of athletic excellence was a husband watching his partner, Billie Aaron, slowly lose her independence. Billie Aaron was diagnosed with systemic lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease that attacked her joints, muscles, and internal organs. Over time, lupus caused severe pain, fatigue, and progressive physical decline. What began as manageable symptoms eventually escalated into paralysis, confining her to a wheelchair and requiring constant care. Lupus has no cure, only management, and the disease reshaped every aspect of their shared life. As Hank Aaron continued public appearances and professional commitments, his private world revolved around caregiving. Friends later recalled that the transition was emotionally devastating. Billie, once vibrant and active, struggled with loss of autonomy, while Hank faced the helplessness of watching someone he loved suffer daily. Medical adaptations replaced spontaneity. Ramps, lifts, and routines replaced freedom. The tragedy of their story lies not in death alone, but in prolonged suffering. Billie lived for years after losing mobility, enduring both physical pain and emotional isolation. Hank Aaron stood beside her, yet no amount of devotion could restore what illness had taken. When Billie eventually passed away, the loss felt like the final chapter of a grief that had begun long before. Hank Aaron's legacy often focuses on resilience in the face of racism and pressure. Less discussed is the resilience required to remain present through years of incurable illness. His story reminds us that greatness does not protect against sorrow. and that the most difficult battles are often fought far from stadium lights. David Ruffin. David Ruffin's voice was raw, emotional, and unforgettable. As the lead singer of The Temptations, he helped define the sound of Motown, delivering performances that felt both powerful and deeply personal. Yet the same intensity that fueled his artistry also haunted his private life, especially within his relationship with Sandra Ruffin, whose struggle with mental illness became an invisible tragedy. Sandra Ruffin suffered from severe depression and emotional instability, conditions that worsened during the late 1970s as David's own addiction spiraled out of control. Mental illness, particularly when untreated, can be as devastating as physical disease, progressively eroding emotional safety, communication, and trust. Friends describe their household as chaotic, marked by substance abuse, exhaustion, and despair. In 1981, Sandra was found unresponsive after ingesting a large quantity of sleeping pills. She survived, but the incident left lasting neurological damage that impaired her ability to function independently. Though not fatal, the outcome was irreversible. From that moment on, their lives were consumed by medical care, debt, and emotional collapse. David Ruffin's career continued to decline as addiction deepened. While there is no evidence of malicious intent, the combination of mental illness and substance abuse proved catastrophic for both partners. Sandra lived with permanent impairment, while David remained trapped in cycles of relapse and regret. The tragedy of David Ruffin's story lies in mutual destruction rather than mystery. No conspiracy, no unanswered crime, only two people overwhelmed by illnesses of the mind that neither fame nor talent could cure. Sandra survived, but her life was forever altered. David did not. Ruffin's story exposes an uncomfortable truth. Mental illness can destroy families as thoroughly as cancer or heart disease. His voice lives on in music history, but his personal life stands as a cautionary reminder that untreated illness, especially when combined with addiction, can quietly dismantle love, dignity, and hope long before death arrives. Percy Sledge. Percy Sledge was known worldwide for one of the most emotionally honest songs ever recorded, When a Man Loves a Woman. The record was not only a commercial triumph, reaching #1, one on both the Billboard Hot 100 and R&B charts, but also a cultural confession of devotion and vulnerability. What many listeners never realized is how closely Percy's real life would come to mirroring the sorrow embedded in that song. In the mid-1990s, Percy's wife, Rosa Sledge, was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. By that time, Percy's mainstream career had slowed, and the financial security people assumed he enjoyed was far less stable than his fame suggested. Cancer treatments were aggressive and expensive, requiring frequent hospital visits, medication, and specialized care. Rosa's condition deteriorated quickly, leaving her physically weak and emotionally exhausted. Percy responded not as a celebrity, but as a desperate husband. He accepted small performances, benefit shows, and regional appearances to raise money for treatment. Friends recalled seeing him sing through tears, fully aware that each performance might buy only weeks or days more time. Rosa often waited backstage in a wheelchair, her presence a quiet reminder that the song, which made Percy famous, was now painfully literal. Despite every effort, Rosa passed away in 1997. Her death left Percy alone in a silence far heavier than applause. The loss marked a permanent emotional turning point. Though Percy continued performing sporadically, the joy that once colored his music was replaced by restraint and reflection. Percy Sledge's tragedy lies in the cruel irony of devotion. A man whose legacy is defined by love could not save the woman he loved most. His story reveals the hidden reality behind classic soul music. Sometimes the greatest songs are not metaphors, but lived experiences shaped by helplessness, sacrifice, and irreversible loss. Sam Moore. Sam Moore, one half of the legendary duo Sam and Dave, helped define the sound of Southern soul with explosive energy and emotional urgency. Songs like Soul Man and Hold On, I'm Comin' celebrated resilience and survival. Yet behind that powerful image was a personal life devastated by addiction and chronic illness, especially within his marriage to Joyce Moore. Joyce Moore suffered from severe diabetes, a disease that progressively damaged her body over many years. Complications led to vision loss, repeated hospitalizations, and partial limb amputation. Diabetes, when advanced, requires constant management and immediate response to medical emergencies. Joyce's condition left her increasingly dependent on care and stability. At the same time, Sam Moore struggled with long-term substance addiction. Despite moments of recovery, relapse remained a constant threat. The combination of Joyce's medical vulnerability and Sam's instability created an environment where emergencies were frequent and outcomes uncertain. In 1988, Joyce was found in a diabetic coma while Sam was incapacitated by drug use. Emergency interventions saved her life, but the incident exposed how close both had come to irreversible tragedy. Joyce survived for years afterward, but her health never recovered. The marriage became a cycle of guilt, caregiving, and fear rather than partnership. Medical debt accumulated, emotional strain deepened, and public sympathy was often overshadowed by judgment. Sam Moore's story is tragic not because of death alone, but because of prolonged deterioration. Joyce's illness stripped away independence and dignity, while Sam's addiction robbed him of the ability to protect the person he loved. Their lives demonstrate how chronic disease and addiction can intertwine, amplifying harm rather than offering escape. In later years, Sam achieved sobriety and openly acknowledged the damage caused by addiction. But recovery came too late to undo what illness had already taken. His story stands as a sobering reminder. Survival songs mean little when life demands strength that addiction cannot provide. Eddie Kendricks. Eddie Kendricks was celebrated for his unmistakable falsetto, a voice that gave the Temptations elegance, sensitivity, and emotional range. Songs like Just My Imagination showcased restraint rather than force, proving that vulnerability could be just as powerful as bravado. Yet Eddie's private life was marked by one of the most devastating dual tragedies in soul music history. In the early 1990s, Eddie's wife, Patricia Kendricks, was diagnosed with late-stage breast cancer. The disease advanced rapidly, leaving her physically weakened and dependent on intensive care. As Eddie focused on supporting her through treatment, fate delivered a second blow. He himself was diagnosed with lung cancer, a disease that would soon claim his life. The household became a space defined by shared decline. Both partners required medical attention, both endured chemotherapy, and neither had the strength to fully care for the other. Friends describe visits filled with quiet despair, two people holding hands, unsure who would survive longer. Medical expenses mounted, and emotional exhaustion replaced hope. Patricia passed away first, leaving Eddie facing his own terminal illness alone. Just months later, in 1992, Eddie Kendricks died at the age of 52. The closeness of their deaths intensified the tragedy, transforming it into a story of love overtaken by illness on both sides. Eddie Kendricks' story is heartbreaking because it offers no escape, no survivor's redemption. There was no time to grieve, no chance to rebuild. Cancer claimed both partners almost simultaneously, erasing a shared future in silence. His legacy remains luminous in music history, but his personal story reveals how unforgiving incurable disease can be. Even the most beautiful voices fall quiet when illness speaks louder, and sometimes it takes everyone at once. Ray Charles. Ray Charles is remembered as one of the greatest musical geniuses of the 20th century, a pioneer who reshaped soul, jazz, gospel, and rhythm and blues into a language the world could feel. Blind since childhood, Ray transformed limitation into innovation, turning personal pain into sound that crossed racial and cultural barriers. Yet behind the triumph of his career was a private life marked by addiction, emotional distance, and the slow devastation of illness that overtook his wife, Della B. Robinson. Della B. Robinson, Ray's wife for over 2 decades, was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer in the late 1980s. The disease progressed aggressively, requiring extensive radiation and chemotherapy that drained her strength and independence. As her health declined, Ray was still battling his own demons, long-standing heroin addiction and physical exhaustion from decades of relentless touring. Friends later described a household divided between hospital routines and silent despair. The tragedy of Ray Charles's story lies in emotional absence rather than mystery. There is no credible evidence of wrongdoing or conspiracy. Instead, there is the painful reality of 2 people unable to meet each other's needs at the most critical moment. Della endured long periods of illness with limited public support, while Ray coped through denial and substance use rather than confrontation. Della B. Robinson passed away in 1996. Her death marked a quiet but irreversible turning point. Ray would later achieve sobriety and publicly acknowledge the damage addiction caused to those he loved. But redemption arrived too late to save his marriage. The grief remained largely unspoken, buried beneath accolades and standing ovations. Ray Charles's story reminds us that artistic brilliance does not guarantee emotional presence. Illness stripped away the illusion of control, leaving behind a man who could move the world with music, but could not stop the slow disappearance of the woman who once anchored his private life. His legacy is immortal, but it carries the weight of love lost to disease and silence. Levi Stubbs. Levi Stubbs was the unmistakable voice of the Four Tops, delivering passion, urgency, and vulnerability with a power that defined Motown's golden era. His performances were intense, dramatic, and deeply human. Yet the greatest test of his strength did not come on stage. It came quietly, at home, as he watched his wife, Clinice Stubbs, fade under the grip of terminal illness. Clinice Stubbs was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer in the late 1990s. The disease advanced rapidly, robbing her of breath, strength, and the ability to live independently. Unlike many public figures who continue working through personal crisis, Levi made a decisive choice. He withdrew almost entirely from performing, declining tours and public appearances to become a full-time caregiver. Their home transformed into a space defined by medication schedules, oxygen equipment, and sleepless nights. Friends recall Levi cooking, cleaning, and staying awake to monitor her breathing, listening for every cough that might signal another emergency. Fame and financial stability offered no protection against the helplessness of watching someone you love struggle for air. Clinice passed away in 2001. Levi was reportedly devastated, retreating further from public life. Though he would later reunite briefly with the Four Tops, his voice never carried the same urgency. The loss had permanently altered him. He once confided that no audience applause could compare to the silence that followed her death. Levi Stubbs' story is tragic because it is rooted in devotion. There was no scandal, no abandonment, only sacrifice. He gave up the stage willingly, understanding that love demanded presence rather than performance. His legacy is not only the sound that shaped a generation, but the quiet dignity of a man who chose caregiving over applause when illness left no other meaningful choice. Diahann Carroll. Diahann Carroll was a trailblazer, an actress who broke barriers with grace, intelligence, and elegance. As the first Black woman to star in her own television series, she redefined representation in Hollywood. Yet in the final chapter of her life, Carroll stepped away from the spotlight to face a private tragedy that tested her resilience more than any role ever had. Carroll's 4th husband, legendary singer Vic Damone, was diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer in the early 2000s. The disease progressed steadily, weakening him physically and emotionally. As his condition worsened, Diahann made a deliberate decision to put her career on hold. She declined acting offers and relocated to care for him full-time, managing medications, treatments, and daily routines herself. Cancer stripped away Damon's strength, leaving him vulnerable and dependent. Friends later recalled that Carroll rarely left his side, even as exhaustion took its toll. The public saw little of this chapter as Carroll kept the struggle private, shielding her husband from media scrutiny. Vic Damone passed away in 2003. The loss left Carroll profoundly changed. Though she would later return to acting briefly, those close to her noted a quieter, more introspective presence. She spoke rarely about that period, but when she did, she acknowledged that caregiving had reshaped her understanding of love, purpose, and sacrifice. Diahann Carroll's story is not defined by mystery or controversy, but by devotion. At the height of her legacy, she chose intimacy over visibility, proving that love sometimes demands retreat rather than applause. Her experience reminds us that behind even the most glamorous lives are moments of private endurance, where illness erases status and only compassion remains. After hearing these stories, one question refuses to disappear. Does greatness come at a hidden cost? These legends gave the world music, art, and history, but in return, many paid with private suffering no audience ever saw. Could fame have saved their partners, or did it make the pain even lonelier? Some stood by love until the very end. Others broke under the weight. There is no single answer, only uncomfortable truths. Which story affected you the most and why? Do you believe success protects or does it isolate? Share your thoughts below, join the conversation, and subscribe for more untold stories on Black Excellence Legends.